Picture this. A movie so crazy that the lead actor disappeared before finishing it. A director got secretly pushed out, and somehow became so beloved that even royalty couldn't stop quoting it. Welcome to the wild, weird, and absolutely bonkers world of Flash Gordon from 1980. This isn't just another superhero movie story. This is a tale of chaos, creativity, and how sometimes the most beautiful disasters create the most unforgettable magic. Today, we're diving deep into 20 mind-blowing facts about Flash Gordon that will make you see this cult classic in a completely new light. And trust me, by the time we reach the end, you'll discover a bonus fact involving James Bond that sounds so ridiculous it almost happened. So buckle up, because we're about to take a rocket ship ride through one of the most chaotic film productions in movie history. The perfect star who vanished. Let's start with Sam J. Jones, the man who looked like he was born to play Flash Gordon. With his square jaw, muscular build, and all-American charm, he seemed like the perfect choice. The guy was a former Marine, had that classic hero look, and could handle the physical demands of the role. On paper, he was exactly what the producers dreamed of when they imagined their space hero. But behind all those perfect looks, things were falling apart faster than a spaceship with a broken engine. The problem started early with producer Dino De Laurentiis. You see, Dino was Italian and didn't speak much English, which created all sorts of communication problems. Add long, exhausting days of filming, creative disagreements, and mounting tension, and you had a recipe for disaster. Then something happened during a holiday break that changed everything. Sam Jones reportedly got into a real fight away from the movie set and ended up in the hospital with injuries. When filming resumed, he came back and finished his scenes like a professional, but something fundamental had broken between him and the producer. Here's where it gets really weird. When it came time for post-production work, Jones refused to come back. In movies, actors usually have to return to record additional dialogue to fix sound problems or improve scenes. It's called ADR, and it's a normal part of making movies. But Jones said no. He also skipped all the promotional events and press tours. Without any big announcement, he just walked away from the entire project. The studio was stuck. They had a finished movie with their star's face all over it, but they needed his voice for crucial scenes. So they did something almost unbelievable. They hired a different actor to dub over nearly every single line that Flash Gordon speaks in the final movie. When you watch Flash Gordon today, you're seeing Sam J. Jones moving his mouth, but you're hearing someone else's voice. Most people who watched the movie had no idea this had happened. The director, who got quietly pushed out. Mike Hodges didn't even want to direct Flash Gordon at first. He came onto the project late, when it was already moving fast and had problems. But once he started working, he found his groove and began creating something special. His vision was smart and funny, with a kind of controlled craziness that made the wild story work. Hodges wanted to make Flash Gordon into a clever satire, poking fun at old-fashioned adventure stories while still making them exciting. He brought a dry sense of humor and stylized action that could have made the movie both entertaining and intelligent. But producer Dino De Laurentiis had a completely different idea. He wanted everything bigger, louder, and more over the top. What started as creative disagreements slowly turned into something much worse. Hodges found himself being pushed out of important decisions. Scenes were changed without asking him. The movie was being edited in ways he never approved. By the time the movie was in post-production, Hodges wasn't even invited to the editing room anymore. There was no dramatic firing, no angry confrontations, no press releases announcing his departure. He was just quietly removed from his own movie, like a magician making someone disappear. The final version that audiences saw still had pieces of Hodges' original vision, but had been reshaped and reassembled into something he barely recognized. Years later, he would talk about the film with mixed feelings, proud of some parts but distant from the whole thing, because Flash Gordon was no longer really his movie. The rejection that created Star Wars. Before Star Wars became the most famous space movie ever made, George Lucas had his heart set on making Flash Gordon. He loved the old comic strips and serials, and he thought he could bring that classic adventure feeling to modern audiences. He went to the people who owned the rights to Flash Gordon, made his pitch, and waited for their answer. They said no. Just like that, Lucas was turned away from his dream project. But here's the amazing part. Instead of giving up, he decided to create his own space adventure. He started writing a story about rebels fighting an evil empire with laser swords and mystical powers, and a farm boy who becomes a hero. That story became Star Wars, which changed movies forever and made Lucas one of the most successful filmmakers in history. So in a weird way, we have Flash Gordon's rejection to thank for Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, and Darth Vader. Sometimes the best things come from not getting what you want first. Chaos on the set. Making Flash Gordon was like trying to build a rocket while it was already flying through space. At the beginning, the crew tried to keep up with constant changes. New scenes were written, old scenes were rewritten, and the script kept changing every single day. Then things got so chaotic that new pages were literally arriving on set just minutes before they had to film them. The actors didn't have time to memorize their lines or rehearse their scenes. They didn't even know what was going to happen next in the story. So the actors did something incredible. They stopped trying to follow the script and started making things up as they went along. They improvised their dialogue, created their own actions, and basically invented their scenes on the spot. Some of the actors later admitted they didn't even understand what the movie was supposed to be about. This chaos could have destroyed the movie, but somehow it made it better. The spontaneous energy and unpredictable moments that came from not having a plan gave Flash Gordon a wild, anything-can-happen feeling that audiences loved. The football scene nobody planned. One of the most memorable scenes in Flash Gordon happens when our hero grabs a football and turns what's supposed to be his execution into an impromptu game. It's exciting, funny, and completely unexpected. But here's the secret. Nobody planned it. The cast was simply told to go with whatever happened. There was no choreography, no stunt planning, no detailed script. They just started throwing things around, improvising football plays, and making up the action as they went along. The actors threw fruit, tossed guards around like they were football players, and created their own plays in the middle of filming. Even Brian Blessed, who played the booming Prince Voltan, started calling out football strategies during the scene like he was a real coach. What should have been a complete disaster instead became one of the movie's most beloved moments. It perfectly captured the playful, anything-goes spirit that made Flash Gordon special. Brian Blessed sound effects problem. Speaking of Brian Blessed, this man didn't just act in his scenes. He lived them with every fiber of his being. During action sequences, he couldn't help himself from making sound effects with his mouth. Every laser blast got a pew-pew, every punch got a pow, and every explosion got his own vocal interpretation. The sound team begged him to stop because they were trying to record clean dialogue, but Bless couldn't control himself. Take after take, he would shout his lines and then immediately follow them with his own sound effects, like a kid playing with toy spaceships. The sound engineers had to go back and clean up whole scenes, removing Bless' enthusiastic sound effects, so they could add the proper movie sounds later. But honestly, his childlike enthusiasm and total commitment to the role helped make Prince Voltan one of the most memorable characters in the film. When a serious actor worried about his reputation, Max von Sydow was one of the most respected actors in the world when he agreed to play the evil Ming the Merciless. He had appeared in serious, artistic films like The Seventh Seal and The Exorcist. He was known for playing complex, thoughtful characters in movies that critics loved. So when news broke that this distinguished actor was going to play a cartoon villain in a campy space movie, many people in Hollywood were shocked. The role of Ming was everything his previous work wasn't. Theatrical, over the top, and completely ridiculous. Von Sydow had real doubts about the decision. He worried that playing such a silly character might damage his reputation as a serious actor. During filming, he reportedly hated wearing the elaborate costume and found the tone of the movie strange and confusing. But something magical happened when the movie came out. Fans absolutely loved his performance as Ming the Merciless. Critics called him the best part of the entire film. Over the years, what once felt like a risky career move became one of his most iconic and beloved roles. Sometimes taking a chance on something completely different is exactly what an artist needs. The casting roulette that almost went wrong. Before Sam J. Jones got the role, Flash Gordon almost looked completely different. The casting process was like a game of roulette where every spin could have changed movie history. Kurt Russell was offered the part first, but he turned it down because he thought the script was too silly. Dennis Hopper was seriously considered, but his interpretation of the character was deemed too weird even for this weird movie. Arnold Schwarzenegger was also in the running, but the producers passed on him because his thick Austrian accent was impossible for audiences to understand. The search for Flash Gordon was becoming desperate when producer Dino De Laurentiis saw Sam J. Jones on a television dating game show. Based on that brief appearance, Dino decided he had found his hero. Sometimes the most important decisions in Hollywood happen in the most unexpected ways. When famous directors said no. Before Mike Hodges came aboard, Dino De Laurentiis had much grander ambitions for Flash Gordon. He didn't want just any director. He wanted one of the greatest filmmakers in the world to turn his space adventure into a work of art. His first call was to Federico Fellini, the Italian master who had created surreal, dreamlike movies that were unlike anything else. Fellini had actually read Flash Gordon comics as a child and was initially interested in the project. However, the tight production schedule and the commercial demands of making a big-budget adventure movie didn't match his artistic process. The second call went to Sergio Leone, the director who had revolutionized Western movies with films like The Good, The Bad, and The Ugly. Leone also had fond memories of reading Flash Gordon comics as a boy, and he got further in the process than Fellini. He actually read the script and had several meetings about the project. But once Leone understood the direction Dino wanted to take the film, he politely declined. Both directors didn't walk away because Flash Gordon wasn't worth making. They walked away because they knew what kind of movie it needed to be, and it wasn't the kind of movie they were meant to make. Costumes held together by hope and duct tape. The costumes in Flash Gordon looked absolutely incredible on screen. The metallic armor gleamed, the elaborate wings spread majestically, and everything looked like it belonged in a futuristic space empire. But up close, the reality was very different. The beautiful costumes were barely holding together. Armor pieces cracked during takes, wings tore under their own weight, and belts would snap open at the worst possible moments. The cast developed an unspoken rule. No matter what happened to their costume during a scene, they had to keep going. If a zipper broke, they had to work it into the scene. If a helmet fell off, they had to make it look intentional. If a piece of armor came loose, they couldn't stop the take. The directors never called cut for costume malfunctions, so the actors learned to roll with whatever happened. Most of what you see in the final film is actually a miracle of creative editing and emergency repairs with duct tape. The glamorous space opera look was achieved through sheer determination and the magic of movie making. Brian Bless's death-defying flight. Brian Bless wasn't satisfied with just wearing the costume of Prince Vultan. He insisted on doing all the flying stunts himself. When the role required Vultan to soar through the air on his massive wings, Bless refused to let a stunt double take his place. The crew rigged him up on cables and wires, suspending him high above the studio floor in full costume. The wings alone weighed nearly 40 pounds, and the harness dug painfully into his chest. During one of the early takes, something went terribly wrong. The rigging system failed, and Bless dropped toward the ground with no safety net and no crash mats to break his fall. Only the quick thinking of several crew members prevented what could have been a fatal accident. The near miss left everyone on set shaken and terrified. But Bless never blamed anyone for the accident. Without hesitation, he got back into the rigging system, adjusted his heavy wings, and continued with the dangerous flying scenes. His commitment to bringing Prince Vultan to life was so complete that he was willing to risk his life for the role. The flood that became part of the movie. Halfway through production, disaster struck in the most unexpected way. A plumbing failure sent water pouring into the studio, flooding the sets and ruining equipment. Props were soaked, costumes were damaged, and expensive camera gear was short-circuited by the water. Most film productions would have shut down immediately to deal with the damage and wait for everything to dry out and be repaired. But the Flash Gordon crew did something typically insane. They kept filming. They rolled cameras on the flooded set, incorporating the water damage into the scene they were shooting. One entire sequence in the final movie features a flooded floor and water-damaged backdrop, and most audiences never noticed because it somehow fit the chaotic energy of the film. On the Flash Gordon set, disasters weren't problems to be solved. They were opportunities to be creative. The attitude was that chaos wasn't a bug, it was a feature. The soundtrack mix-up that created magic. The original plan was to have Pink Floyd create the soundtrack for Flash Gordon. The legendary rock band seemed like a perfect match for the space opera's psychedelic visuals and adventurous spirit. But producer Dino De Laurentiis had never heard of Pink Floyd and wasn't interested in their music. Instead, someone handed him a Queen album. Dino listened to about 10 seconds of it and immediately said, "Get me the Queens." This miscommunication led to one of the most fortuitous mistakes in movie history. Queen had only a few weeks to write and record the entire soundtrack while they were still in the middle of a world tour. They wrote songs in hotel rooms between concerts, recorded tracks in whatever studios they could find, and somehow created not just a soundtrack, but an anthem that became inseparable from the movie. The Queen soundtrack didn't just support Flash Gordon. It became part of its identity. Songs like Flash became classics that people still sing decades later. Sometimes the best art comes from accidents and impossible deadlines. The scene that almost got the movie banned. There's a scene in Flash Gordon where the evil Ming is about to marry Dale Arden against her will, and Flash arrives to rescue her just in time. It was supposed to be a classic adventure movie moment. Villain threatens heroine. Hero saved the day. But when film censors watched the scene, they didn't see campy adventure. They saw something much darker and more disturbing. Ming's threats toward Dale came across as genuinely menacing rather than cartoonishly evil. The dialogue and tone suggested violence that made censors very uncomfortable. This was 1980, and standards for family entertainment were stricter than they are today. In several countries, including Ireland and Singapore, censors debated cutting the scene entirely or giving the movie a much harsher rating that would keep children from seeing it. Some countries threatened to ban Flash Gordon completely unless changes were made to tone down the scene. The filmmakers fought to keep the scene intact, and they mostly succeeded, but it was a close call that almost cost them their audience. Cultural misunderstandings and bans. While Western audiences saw Flash Gordon as colorful, silly fun, people in other parts of the world saw something entirely different. In countries like Singapore and Malaysia, the movie ran into immediate problems with censors who weren't concerned about violence or language. Instead, they were worried about the symbols, costumes, and ceremonies shown in the film. The circular patterns, ritualistic clothing, and darkly lit scenes combined with Ming's godlike authority created imagery that some censorship boards interpreted as occultism or black magic. What the filmmakers intended as harmless fantasy adventure was seen by some cultures as potentially dangerous religious or supernatural content. The movie was banned outright in several regions, heavily edited in others, and moved from family theaters to restricted showings. This created one of the strangest censorship cases in science fiction movie history, where a campy space adventure was treated like a threat to public morality because of cultural misunderstandings and different interpretations of its imagery. The comic artist who disowned the movie, long before there was a Flash Gordon movie, there was a beautiful comic strip illustrated by Al Williamson. Williamson wasn't just any artist. He was one of the people who defined what Flash Gordon looked like for generations of readers. His drawings were elegant, dramatic, and full of detail that brought nobility and dignity to the character. Williamson's version of Flash Gordon was more myth than joke, a genuine hero in a universe of wonder and danger. His artwork had influenced countless other artists and helped keep the character alive in popular culture. So when the 1980 movie came out, Williamson went to see what Hollywood had done with his beloved character. He sat through the entire film, watching the camp humor, the loud colors, and the over-the-top performances. When the credits rolled, he left the theater in silence. Williamson quietly disowned the movie. To him, the film had completely missed what made Flash Gordon special. The campy tone and silly jokes weren't what he'd spent decades drawing. He felt that Hollywood had taken something noble and turned it into a cartoon. For longtime fans of the comic strip, this was a painful reminder that not every adaptation captures what made the original special. Sometimes even heroes lose their shape when they move from one medium to another. The producer who made decisions by gut feeling. Dino De Laurentiis was a legendary producer, But his approach to Flash Gordon was unlike anything he had done before. Because he didn't speak much English, he couldn't read the script or follow complex conversations about the movie's direction. Instead, he made every major decision based on pure instinct. When someone pitched Flash Gordon to him, he said yes instantly without reading anything or understanding the tone they were going for. He just liked the visual concept of a space adventure. Every choice about casting, music, and style was made from gut feelings rather than careful analysis. This sounds like a recipe for disaster, but somehow Dino's instinctive approach created something unique. Because he wasn't overthinking every decision or trying to follow Hollywood formulas, the movie ended up being genuinely unpredictable and original. The chaos and unpredictability that came from having a producer who made choices by feeling rather than strategy became part of what made Flash Gordon special. A Tale of Two Countries. When Flash Gordon opened in American theaters, the reaction was lukewarm at best. Critics didn't know what to make of its strange tone, and audiences expecting another serious space opera like Star Wars felt confused by its campy humor and theatrical style. The box office numbers were disappointing, and the movie quickly faded from American theaters. But across the Atlantic Ocean, something completely different happened. British audiences embraced Flash Gordon with enthusiasm that surprised everyone. They loved the absurdity, the style, the Queen soundtrack, and the unapologetic silliness of it all. The movie became a regular feature on British television, filled poster shops across the UK, and became a rite of passage for British science fiction fans. Lines from the movie were memorized and quoted. Queen songs were played at parties, and Flash Gordon became a cultural phenomenon. What flopped in America became a beloved classic in Britain. Over time, the UK didn't just keep Flash Gordon alive. They helped turn it into a legend that eventually spread back to the rest of the world. Royal approval. In a 2020 interview, Brian Bless shared an incredible secret that sounds almost too good to be true. He claimed that Queen Elizabeth II once told him personally that she loved Flash Gordon and not just liked it. She genuinely loved it. According to Bless, the Queen was particularly fond of his character's famous line, "Gordon's alive," and would rewatch the movie with her grandchildren during holiday gatherings at the palace. There were no cameras present, no official confirmation, just a private conversation between an actor and the monarch. This story sounds unbelievable, but with Flash Gordon, nothing feels too far-fetched. The idea that the Queen of England was secretly quoting lines from a campy space opera somehow fits perfectly with the movie's ability to win over the most unexpected audiences, inspiring a new generation of filmmakers. Flash Gordon wasn't embraced by critics when it first came out, but over the years, it grew into something much more important than a box office hit. A new generation of filmmakers discovered the movie and saw something special in its fearless approach to storytelling. Edgar Wright, who would go on to direct movies like Shaun of the Dead and Baby Driver, credits Flash Gordon with teaching him how music and visuals could work together to drive a story forward. The way Queen's soundtrack integrated with the action showed him new possibilities for filmmaking. Taika Waititi, director of Thor Ragnarok, called Flash Gordon fearless, absurd, and oddly sincere. He saw in it a blueprint for how to make movies that were simultaneously funny and emotionally engaging. James Gunn saw something in Flash Gordon that would later inspire Guardians of the Galaxy. The colors, the soundtrack-driven storytelling, and the attitude of not taking itself too seriously all influence his approach to making space adventures. These weren't just tributes or homages. They were blueprints for a new way of making movies. Flash Gordon didn't follow the rules of conventional filmmaking, and that gave other directors permission to break the rules too. The James Bond crossover that almost happened. Here's our bonus fact, and it's so weird that it sounds like something from the movie itself. In the early 1980s, after Flash Gordon had found its cult following, producers started brainstorming ideas for a sequel. Most of the ideas were pretty standard. More space adventures, new villains, bigger special effects. But one pitch was absolutely insane. A crossover movie featuring Flash Gordon and James Bond. The concept was completely serious. They envisioned spy gadgets being used in space battles, the merciless facing off against British intelligence agency MI6, and some kind of cosmic Cold War between Earth's secret agents and alien empires. The project never got past the planning stages, but it was real. There are actual memos, story treatments, and even early concept sketches showing the two most iconic British adventure heroes working together. The idea of James Bond using his spy skills against space tyrants while Flash Gordon learned about secret agent tactics sounds ridiculous, which is probably exactly why it almost happened. In the world of Flash Gordon, where chaos was a plan and impossible ideas became reality, a James Bond crossover somehow made perfect sense. The legacy that refused to die. Flash Gordon wasn't supposed to last. It was loud, chaotic, and completely out of step with what movie studios thought audiences wanted. It failed at the box office, confused critics, and seemed destined to be forgotten as a weird experiment from 1980. But somehow it survived, not because it followed a successful formula, but because it didn't follow any formula at all. What began as a risky gamble became something deeply personal for the people who discovered it. The movie found its audience slowly, through television broadcasts, home video, and word of mouth. People didn't just watch Flash Gordon, they experienced it. They sang along with Queen's soundtrack, quoted the ridiculous dialogue, and embraced the pure joy of a movie that was completely unafraid to be silly. Flash Gordon proved that sometimes the most important thing a movie can do is make people feel something, even if that something is just pure, uncomplicated fun. In a world of serious blockbusters and carefully calculated entertainment, Flash Gordon remained boldly, unapologetically strange. The movie taught us that not every film needs to make perfect sense or follow conventional wisdom. Sometimes the most memorable experiences come from projects that are willing to fail spectacularly while reaching for something impossible. Flash Gordon may have been chaos, but it was beautiful chaos that created something genuinely special. And in the end, that's why Gordon's not just alive. He never really left. If this wild journey through the making of Flash Gordon brought back memories or opened your eyes to something new about this incredible movie, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. What's your favorite Flash Gordon moment? Which of these behind-the-scenes facts surprised you the most? And if you enjoyed diving deep into the crazy world of movie-making disasters that somehow became masterpieces, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories from Hollywood's most unpredictable productions. Share this video with anyone who loves movies that dare to be different, because sometimes the best stories are the ones that almost never got told. Thanks for watching, and remember, in the spirit of Flash Gordon, never be afraid to take the impossible seriously and have fun doing it.